Keisha walked through the school courtyard, her head low, clutching her books close to her chest. The late September sun was warm, but it did nothing to lift the heavy weight pressing on her shoulders. Every step she took felt like moving through quicksand. The noise around her, the chatter, laughter, the clanging of lockers felt distant, like echoes from a world she no longer belonged to. She wasn't new to this feeling. High school had always been a battleground. Not because she wasn't smart or kind. Not because she lacked friends. But because of the color of her skin. At 17, she knew the quiet, persistent sting of being othered. And today, that sting was about to burn hotter than ever. Her eyes flicked up briefly to the cluster of students gathered by the bleachers. There he was, Jack Turner, the golden boy of the school. White, tall, with a smile that could light up the whole town. Captain of the football team, beloved by teachers and students alike. The kind of guy who never needed to try. Everyone looked up to him. Everyone wanted to be him or be with him. Except Keisha. She knew Jack's reputation. The way he could charm a crowd, make the girls swoon. But behind that smile, there was something else. Something she had seen just once, but it burned clear in her memory. It was a month ago, during lunch break. Keisha was sitting alone on a bench, eating a sandwich, trying to ignore the world. Jack and his friends were nearby, tossing a football back and forth. Without warning, Jack shouted something. The laughter came fast after, loud and cruel. "You lost your ball, girl? Or is that your dignity you dropped?" Jack's voice was sharp, cutting through the chatter. The group laughed harder. Keisha froze, cheeks burning. She looked down, not wanting to draw more attention. That moment echoed in her mind as she walked now. Suddenly, a voice called out loud and clear. "Hey, Keisha." She stopped. Jack was walking toward her, his smile wider than ever. The courtyard seemed to fall silent. Conversations died. Eyes turned. Keisha's heart pounded. She swallowed hard. "What do you want, Jack?" she asked, voice shaking but steady. He reached into his backpack and pulled out a phone. "Check this out," he said, grinning. "It's hilarious." Keisha glanced at the screen. Her stomach dropped. It was a video, a clip from earlier that day in the bathroom. She hadn't noticed when someone recorded her, but the footage was unmistakable. She was alone, trying to fix her hair, looking nervous. Jack's voice was dubbed over, mocking her accent, twisting her words. The crowd around them erupted with laughter. Keisha felt tears sting her eyes. She tried to snatch the phone away. "Stop it," she said, voice trembling. But Jack held it higher. "Come on, lighten up. It's just a joke." She looked around, searching for help, but everyone just watched, some smirking, others whispering. A boy near the edge muttered, "Typical." Keisha's face burned. She wanted to disappear. Jack's laughter was loudest of all. She grabbed her books and ran toward the nearest exit, the sound of mocking laughter chasing her down the hall. At home, the silence was suffocating. Her mother sat on the couch, eyes tired but steady. "You okay, baby?" she asked softly. Keisha shook her head, burying her face in her hands. "It's happening again," she whispered. Her mother pulled her close. "I'm so sorry," she said. Keisha wanted to scream at the unfairness of it all. Why did this keep happening? Why did she have to fight just to exist? The next day at school was worse. Whispers followed her like shadows. Her phone buzzed nonstop, messages filled with cruel jokes, threats thinly veiled as funny memes. She ignored them as best she could, but inside, the fear and shame clawed deep. In class, Marcus, a quiet boy from her history class, slid a note onto her desk. "You're not alone." Keisha folded it carefully, a small flicker of warmth in her chest. But the damage was done. The halls were colder. The air thicker. And Jack? He walked by with his usual entourage, laughing, confident, untouchable. That evening, Keisha stared out her bedroom window, watching the last light fade. Her grandmother's words echoed in her mind. "You are stronger than the world's cruelty. Don't let them steal your light." But the light felt dim, flickering. She didn't know if she could hold on. The day after, a surprise. The principal called her to his office. Keisha's heart raced. She feared another lecture, or worse. But the principal's face was serious, not angry. "We're aware of what's been happening," he said carefully. "We want to support you." For a moment, something like hope blossomed. Could things change? Walking back to class, she caught sight of Jack again. He looked at her, not with mockery, but something else. Uncertainty? Regret? Keisha looked away quickly. She wasn't ready for this new battle. The courtyard buzzed with life again. But for Keisha, everything had shifted. The fight was no longer just against the bullies. It was against the fear inside her. Against the pain. Against the questions she dreaded most. Who was she if the world refused to see her? The morning sun slipped through the blinds, casting thin lines of light across Keisha's room. She lay awake longer than usual, staring at the ceiling, the events of the day before swirling in her mind like a storm. Her chest felt tight, heavy with a mix of shame, anger, and exhaustion. She was exhausted physically and emotionally drained, but she couldn't sleep, not with the images and sounds replaying in her head. Her phone buzzed quietly on the nightstand. She reached for it with trembling fingers. A new message. "You're a joke. Everyone's laughing at you." Her breath caught. The words stabbed deeper than any physical wound. She locked the screen and tossed the phone aside. No one would win this fight. Not today. At breakfast, her mother watched her carefully. "Did the principal say anything else?" she asked gently. Keisha shook her head. "No. Just that they're aware and want to help." Her mother sighed, running a hand through her hair. "Sometimes words aren't enough. But you're strong, Keisha. Stronger than they know." Keisha wanted to believe it. Wanted to hold on to that strength. But the doubt crept in, slow and suffocating. School was a maze of eyes and whispers. In the hallways, she felt the weight of invisible stares. At her locker, someone had scrawled "joke" in messy black letters. Her heart clenched, but she didn't cry. Not here. Not now. In history class, Marcus sat beside her, his presence a small comfort in the chaos. "You don't have to do this alone," he said quietly. Keisha looked at him. Marcus was nothing like Jack, quiet, kind, unassuming. But there was something real in his voice. "Thanks," she whispered. The bell rang, signaling lunch break. Keisha walked to the courtyard, clutching her lunch tray. The same place. The same crowd. Jack was there, surrounded by friends, laughter spilling out in waves. His gaze caught hers for a split second. No apology. No regret. Just cold indifference. She found a quiet corner beneath a tree, away from the noise. Opening her lunchbox, she tried to focus on her food. But then, footsteps approached. "Mind if I sit?" Marcus asked. Keisha nodded. They ate in silence for a moment. Then Marcus spoke. "I don't get why people are so cruel." Keisha shrugged. "Some people are afraid of what they don't understand." Marcus looked at her, eyes steady. "Maybe that's why you have to keep fighting." The words echoed inside her. Fight. Keep fighting. She wondered how long she could. Later that day, the group project was assigned. Keisha's heart sank when she saw the list. Jack Turner. Their eyes met across the room. The air shifted. In the library, the tension was thick. Jack tried to act casual, but Keisha saw through it. He wasn't the confident boy from the courtyard. He looked tired. "Let's get this done," she said, forcing calm. Jack nodded, avoiding her gaze. They worked in silence. But then Jack spoke, voice low. "Look, Keisha, about what happened." She cut him off. "Don't." Her voice was firm. "No apologies. No excuses." Jack looked surprised. "Okay." The silence returned. Walking home, Keisha's thoughts swirled. Was Jack really sorry? Or was this just another game? She wasn't sure. That night, her mother found her crying quietly in her room. "I can't do this anymore," Keisha said. Her mother sat beside her. "I know it hurts. But you're not alone." Keisha nodded, tears still falling. "I just want to be seen." The next day, the school was buzzing. News had spread. Some students were taking sides. Some whispered about Jack's family troubles, rumors about his father's illness and financial struggles. Keisha overheard it all. But it didn't change what had happened. In the cafeteria, a group of girls blocked her path. "You think you're special?" one sneered. "Just because Jack said sorry?" Keisha stood tall. "No. Because I'm me." The girls laughed and walked away. Marcus caught her after class. "You stood up for yourself." Keisha smiled faintly. "I'm learning." Back in her room, she wrote in her journal. "Every day is a battle. But I'm still here." She closed the book, a small spark of hope flickering inside. The days after the project assignment felt like walking a tightrope for Keisha. Every step was calculated, every glance measured. Jack was beside her during class hours, but the silence between them was heavy. They sat together for hours, surrounded by books and papers, but neither one spoke much. Keisha hated it. She wanted answers. She wanted honesty. But mostly, she wanted Jack to understand how deep the hurt went. One afternoon, as they worked in the quiet library corner, Jack suddenly broke the silence. "Why did you run yesterday?" he asked, eyes fixed on his notebook. Keisha didn't look up. "Because I didn't want your pity," she said softly. Jack paused, then met her gaze for the first time. "I'm not trying to pity you," he said, voice low. "Then why did you do it?" "The video, the laughing." Her voice cracked with the pain she'd held back for weeks. Jack swallowed hard. "It was stupid. I didn't think. I didn't know it would hurt you like this." Keisha shook her head. "That's the problem. You didn't know." She stood, gathering her books. "I have to go. Outside, the crisp autumn air hit her face, cool and sharp. She walked briskly, trying to outrun the knot tightening in her chest. As she passed the football field, she heard the cheers. Jack was on the field, leading the team, shining under the bright lights. Somewhere beneath the surface, Keisha realized she envied him. Not for his popularity, but for the ease with which he seemed to belong. That evening, her phone buzzed again. This time, a message from Marcus. "Dinner at my place? You need a break." Keisha smiled. For the first time in days, she felt a flicker of relief. At Marcus's house, the atmosphere was warm and inviting. His mother greeted her with a smile, offering tea and snacks. They sat around the kitchen table, laughing quietly about school and silly things. For a moment, Keisha forgot the pain. Later, Marcus and Keisha sat on the porch steps. "Why do you think people hate so easily?" Keisha asked. Marcus looked thoughtful. "I think it's fear. Fear of difference. Fear of what they don't understand." Keisha nodded. "Maybe that's why I have to keep fighting." Marcus smiled. "And I'll fight with you." Back at school, things took a darker turn. One morning, Keisha found her locker vandalized. The words "Go back where you came from" were scrawled across it in sharp letters. Tears welled up, but she wiped them away quickly. She refused to give them the satisfaction. At lunch, a group of students gathered, whispering loudly enough for her to hear. "She thinks she can change anything. She's just a problem." Jack's eyes met hers from across the table. No apology. No remorse. Keisha looked away, the sting sharper than before. In class, the teacher announced a school assembly about respect and diversity. Keisha's heart pounded. Was this real change? Or just words? At the assembly, students sat in silence as the principal spoke. "We cannot tolerate hate or bullying in our school." But Keisha knew that words alone wouldn't fix what was broken. She wanted to stand up, to speak, but the fear held her back. That night, she wrote again in her journal. "I am tired, but I am not broken." She closed it firmly. Tomorrow, she promised herself she would find the courage to fight back. The next morning, Keisha woke with a tightness in her chest. The night had been restless, haunted by dreams of judgment and rejection. But beneath the fear, a new determination stirred. Today, she would not hide. At school, the atmosphere buzzed with whispers and sideways glances. The assembly from yesterday hadn't erased the tension. If anything, it made things worse. Some students felt exposed, others emboldened to push boundaries. Keisha walked down the hallway, her head held a little higher. She passed her vandalized locker, now covered with paper taped over the hateful words. It was a small victory, but she knew it wasn't enough. In homeroom, her teacher caught her eye and offered a small, supportive smile. It was one of the few moments that made Keisha feel seen, not invisible. When the bell rang for lunch, Keisha headed to the courtyard. Marcus was already waiting, sitting under their usual tree, his backpack leaning beside him. "Hey," he greeted, standing up as she approached. "Hey," she replied, forcing a smile. The sun was warm on her skin, but the weight of the day settled quickly. "Ready for the group project meeting?" Marcus asked. Keisha nodded. As they walked towards the library, they passed Jack and his friends. The usual smirks and sneers followed her like a shadow. Jack's gaze locked with hers briefly, no apology, no regret. Inside the library, Keisha and Marcus waited for the others. Jack arrived last, his expression guarded. The silence was thick as they sat around the table. The other group members talked about the project, but the tension between Keisha and Jack was palpable. Finally, Jack spoke. "Look, I want to clear the air," he said, voice low. Keisha raised an eyebrow. "Go on," she challenged. Jack took a deep breath. "I didn't realize how much I hurt you. I thought it was just a joke, but I see now it was more than that." Keisha studied him carefully. "Was this genuine? Or just another performance?" "I don't want your pity," she said quietly. Jack nodded. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I just want you to know I'm sorry." The group project moved forward, but the tension remained. Keisha found herself wrestling with her feelings. Could she trust Jack? Did she want to? Marcus noticed her struggle. "Whatever you decide, I'm here," he said. Keisha smiled, grateful. The days passed slowly. The whispers and stares didn't stop. But Keisha grew stronger. She started speaking up in class, refusing to be silenced. Her voice cracked sometimes, but she kept going. One afternoon after school, Keisha received a message from an unknown number. "You're not alone. Meet me by the old gym." Curious and cautious, she decided to go. When she arrived, a small group of students greeted her warmly. They were part of a diversity club, working to create a safer space for everyone. For the first time in weeks, Keisha felt hope. At home, her mother noticed the change. "You seem different," she said softly. Keisha nodded. "I'm starting to find my voice." Her mother smiled, eyes shining. "That's all I ever wanted for you." That night, Keisha wrote in her journal. The fight isn't over. But I'm not giving up. She closed the book, feeling a flicker of light inside. The following week passed in a blur of tension and small victories. Keisha was learning to navigate the hostile world around her with new tools, words, allies, and a resolve she didn't know she had. The Diversity Club had become a refuge. Their meetings were quiet and purposeful. Students shared stories of pain and resilience, their voices mingling in solidarity. One afternoon, as she entered the classroom, Keisha noticed Jack waiting by the door. He looked different, less confident, more uncertain. The usual arrogance was gone. "Keisha," he said quietly. She paused, unsure if she should respond. I want to talk," he added. Her eyes searched his face. Was this genuine, or another act? She nodded slowly. They walked down the hall together, the noise of the school fading behind them. "Look, I don't expect you to forgive me," Jack began. "But I need to be honest. That video. I was trying to fit in. To be part of something. But I didn't realize how much it hurt you." Keisha stopped, looking at him. "It wasn't just a joke, Jack. It was humiliation. Racism." Jack swallowed. "I know. I'm sorry." Her voice was steady. "Sorry isn't enough." Jack nodded, eyes downcast. "I understand. I want to make it right. If you'll let me." Keisha hesitated. Trust wasn't something she could give lightly. But beneath the anger, she sensed a flicker of remorse. "Maybe," she said quietly. "But it won't be easy." Jack looked up, hope flickering in his eyes. That afternoon, Keisha joined the Diversity Club meeting. The room buzzed with energy. Students planned events, discussions, and campaigns. Keisha felt alive, part of something bigger. Marcus handed her a flyer. "We're organizing a panel on racial discrimination," he said. Keisha's heart pounded. "Will you speak?" Marcus asked. She nodded. "I will." Days turned into weeks. Keisha's voice grew stronger. She faced whispers, hostile looks, even threats, but she refused to back down. One afternoon, as she walked through the hallway, a voice sneered behind her. "You're just trying to stir up trouble." Keisha turned, facing the boy. "I'm standing up for what's right," she said firmly. He scoffed. "We'll see how long you last." The tension escalated. Keisha confided in her mother one evening. "I'm scared," she admitted. Her mother took her hands. "Fear is natural. But courage is standing up even when you're afraid." Keisha nodded. At school, the panel discussion arrived. The auditorium was packed. Students, teachers, and parents filled the seats. Keisha stood behind the podium, heart racing. She looked out at the crowd. "This is my story," she began. "And the story of many others who face discrimination every day." Her voice trembled but grew steadier. She spoke of pain, resilience, and hope. By the time she finished, the room was silent. Then, applause. Afterwards, students approached her, some with tears, others with gratitude. Marcus smiled proudly. "You did it." Keisha smiled back, feeling a warmth she hadn't known in months. But not everyone was pleased. The next day, Jack approached her. "We need to talk," he said urgently. Keisha followed him to the empty gym. "I've been suspended," Jack said quietly. "What?" she asked. "For my part in the video and other things. The school is cracking down." Keisha's heart pounded. "I'm sorry you have to go through this," she said. Jack looked at her. "Thanks for standing by me." Keisha was surprised. "Why?" she asked. "Because you showed me what real courage looks like." That night, Keisha wrote again. "Change is slow. But it's coming." She closed her journal, feeling a fragile hope. Days after Jack's suspension, the school felt different, quieter, but also charged. Conversations whispered behind closed doors. Keisha noticed the subtle shifts, teachers watching more closely, students avoiding certain topics, and a growing divide between those who supported change and those who resisted it. At first, Keisha welcomed the attention. She was becoming a symbol, a voice for many. But the weight was heavy. With every supportive comment came a whispered threat. With every nod of encouragement, a cold glare. One afternoon after class, Keisha found a note slipped into her locker. The paper was folded carefully, but the words inside were anything but gentle. "You don't belong here. Keep your mouth shut." Her hands trembled as she read the message. A familiar knot tightened in her stomach, the knot of fear and anger intertwined. She stuffed the note into her backpack, refusing to let it break her spirit. That evening, Keisha met Marcus at the coffee shop they frequented. The warmth of the place felt comforting against the cold reality of school. "Another one?" Marcus asked gently, nodding toward her backpack. Keisha sighed. "Yeah, it's getting worse." Marcus's face hardened. "We have to tell someone." Keisha shook her head. "If we do, they'll just say it's kids being kids. It won't change anything." Marcus leaned forward. "We can't let them silence you." "Not now." Keisha met his eyes. "I know. But I'm scared, Marcus." Silence hung between them, thick and heavy. Finally, Marcus reached out, squeezing her hand. You're not alone. The next day, Keisha found herself in the principal's office. The principal, Mrs. Donovan, was stern but compassionate. We're aware of the notes, Mrs. Donovan said. We take this seriously. We'll increase security and monitor the situation. Keisha nodded, though she wasn't sure if words alone would stop the hate. I want to help, she said softly. Maybe a student forum. A place where we can talk openly. Mrs. Donovan considered. That's a good idea. I'll support you. The forum was scheduled for the following week. Flyers were posted inviting all students to attend and share their experiences. Keisha and Marcus worked tirelessly, organizing speakers and preparing to lead. When the day arrived, the auditorium filled slowly. Nervous energy buzzed in the air. Keisha took a deep breath and stepped onto the stage, her heart pounding. This is a safe space, she began. A place to listen, to understand, and to heal. One by one, students stood to share their stories of bullying, discrimination, and isolation. Tears fell. Voices broke. But so did walls. After the forum, a teacher approached Keisha. Thank you, she said. You've started something important here. Keisha smiled tiredly. It's just the beginning. But change didn't come without backlash. Outside school, social media erupted. Some praised Keisha's courage, others attacked her relentlessly. One evening, she opened her phone to a flood of messages, some hateful, some supportive. The hate stung sharper than ever. Her mother sat beside her that night, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. People will always try to tear down what they fear, she said. But you are stronger. Keisha leaned into her mother's embrace, drawing strength from her warmth. The following week, Jack returned to school. The suspension had humbled him. He was quieter, more reflective. He approached Keisha cautiously one afternoon. Can we talk? He asked. She hesitated, then nodded. They walked to the quiet library corner. Jack looked nervous. I've been thinking, he said. About everything. About how much I don't understand. Keisha folded her arms. Understanding comes with listening. Jack nodded. Teach me. The two began talking more often. Slowly, a fragile truce formed. Jack asked questions. Keisha answered honestly. It wasn't easy. Old wounds surfaced. But for the first time, there was a glimmer of hope. One day, Jack surprised her with a simple gesture. He brought a book about Black history and handed it to her. I want to learn more, he said. Not just about you, but about the experiences I ignored. Keisha accepted it, a small smile breaking through. Life at school was still hard. The hate hadn't disappeared, but Keisha's voice grew stronger. The support from her friends, Marcus, and even some teachers kept her going. She realized she wasn't fighting alone. That night, writing in her journal, she reflected. Fear is real, but so is courage. And love. I am learning to hold them all at once. The weeks following the forum were a turbulent mix of progress and setbacks. Keisha's courage inspired many but also drew sharper hostility from others. She felt the eyes of the school, some full of respect, others filled with resentment. Every morning as she walked through the halls, she prepared herself for the day. Some days were easier than others. Some days she could almost forget the whispers, the sideways glances. But other days, the weight of isolation pressed down so heavily it threatened to crush her. One day, after class, Keisha sat alone in the library, trying to focus on her homework. The quiet space was a welcome refuge from the chaos outside. But even here, peace was fragile. She heard footsteps approaching. It was Jack. Mind if I sit? He asked. Keisha looked up, surprised, then nodded. Jack sat down across from her, pulling out his notebook. I've been working on an essay, he said. About what happened, about race and privilege. Keisha raised an eyebrow. That's unexpected. Jack shrugged. I want to understand. And maybe help. Their conversation was awkward at first, but gradually became more open. Jack asked difficult questions, some that Keisha wished people would ask more often. She answered honestly even when it was painful. I didn't realize how much I took for granted, Jack admitted. How blind I was. Keisha looked down. It's not easy to face the truth. Jack nodded. But it's necessary. Outside, rumors swirled. Some students accused Jack of trying too hard to make amends. Others questioned Keisha's motives, whispering that she was using the attention. The social media storm raged on. Keisha found herself reading hateful comments late at night. It was exhausting. She wondered how much longer she could hold on. One evening, Marcus met her at the park. You okay? He asked gently. Keisha forced a smile. As okay as I can be. He sat beside her. You don't have to carry this alone. She looked at him, grateful. Thank you. A turning point came when the school announced a diversity initiative inspired by the students' efforts. New policies, training sessions for staff, and support groups were introduced. Keisha was invited to speak at the launch event. Standing before the crowd, she felt a mix of fear and pride. "This isn't just about me," she said. "It's about all of us. About creating a place where everyone belongs." Her voice was strong. The applause was genuine. After the event, a group of students approached her. "We want to help," one said. "We want to be part of the change." Keisha smiled, feeling hope bloom. But progress was never linear. One afternoon, Keisha found her locker vandalized again. This time, the message was harsher. "You'll never belong here." Her heart broke, but she refused to show it. She reported the incident. The school acted swiftly, increasing security and promising to hold those responsible accountable. That night, Keisha's mother hugged her tightly. "You're brave," she said. "More than you know." Keisha leaned into the embrace, tears slipping down her cheeks. "I'm trying." The relationship between Keisha and Jack deepened. They continued their conversations, building a fragile friendship based on honesty and respect. Jack confided in her about his struggles, the backlash from friends, the guilt he carried. "I want to do better," he said. "For myself and for others." Keisha nodded. Change starts with one step. The school year neared its end. Keisha reflected on how far she'd come, from the girl silenced by fear to a young woman standing up against injustice. She still faced challenges. The wounds ran deep, but she was no longer alone. That evening, she wrote in her journal, "The path is hard, but every step forward is a victory. I will keep walking." Spring was settling in, softening the sharp edges of winter with its warm light and promise of growth. Yet, for Keisha, the days still held their share of challenges. The school corridors remained a battlefield, though the terrain had shifted. Now, there were allies, conversations, and slowly breaking barriers. But old wounds still festered beneath the surface. One morning, Keisha arrived early, the sun casting long shadows across the courtyard. She sat on the bench, her journal resting on her lap, pages filled with thoughts, dreams, and fears. Today was the day of the big game, the last football match of the season, and the whole school buzzed with excitement. Jack's team was expected to win, and his popularity was at its peak again. Despite everything, she felt an uneasy tug in her chest. As students gathered, laughter and cheers echoed. Jack spotted Keisha from across the field and walked over. "Hey," he said, slightly out of breath. "Hey," she replied cautiously. He looked around, then lowered his voice. "Listen, I wanted to say thank you for standing by me even when it wasn't easy." Keisha glanced away. "It wasn't easy for me either." Jack nodded. "I know. I hope things can be better." She met his eyes. "They can be." The crowd swelled as the game kicked off. The stadium roared with energy. Keisha found herself caught between the exhilaration of the event and the lingering tension from the past months. During halftime, Marcus joined her. "You okay?" he asked. Keisha shrugged. "Sometimes I feel like I'm two people, one fighting for change, the other just trying to survive." Marcus smiled softly. "That's normal. You're human." They watched as Jack and his teammates strategized on the field. But the peace was shattered when a group of students, known for their harsh attitudes, began shouting slurs from the stands. The words cut through the air like knives. Keisha's heart raced. Marcus tightened his grip on her arm. "We need to report this." Keisha shook her head. "They'll say we're overreacting." But the insults kept coming, louder, more aggressive. Suddenly, a ball flew toward the stands, hitting Marcus squarely. The crowd gasped. Chaos erupted. Teachers and security rushed in. The players paused, confusion and anger mixing on their faces. Jack approached Keisha, face pale. "I'm sorry," he said, voice strained. She nodded, swallowing her fear. After the game, the school held an emergency meeting. Administrators condemned the behavior and promised stricter consequences. But for Keisha, the damage felt deeper than policy changes. That night, she lay awake, replaying the incident. Days later, in the quiet of her room, she stared at her reflection. Who was she now? The girl who was humiliated? The girl who fought back? Or someone else? Her phone buzzed. A message from Jack. "Can we talk? Please." They met at the park, beneath the ancient oak tree, leaves whispering in the breeze. Jack looked tired. "I'm scared," he admitted. "Not just for me, but for all of this. I want to help, but sometimes it feels like too much." Keisha sat beside him. "I'm scared too," she said. "But that doesn't mean we stop." Jack nodded. "We need each other." The bond between them, once fragile, now carried a new weight, understanding, respect, and the shared burden of change. Meanwhile, Keisha's voice grew louder beyond the school. Local newspapers picked up her story. Interviews followed. She became a reluctant symbol of resilience. The pressure mounted. Not all of it was kind. One evening, after a long day, Keisha received a phone call. A voice, harsh and threatening. "Stay out of our way," it warned. "Or else." Her hands shook. She told her mother everything. "We'll get through this," her mother said firmly. Together. Despite the threats, Keisha refused to be silenced. She organized a community event, a day of stories and healing, inviting people from all backgrounds. The turnout was bigger than expected. People listened. They shared. Walls cracked. Standing on the stage that day, Keisha felt something she hadn't before, a profound connection to her community. The pain was still there, but so was hope. That night, she wrote in her journal, "Fear tries to hold me back. But I am stronger. We are stronger." The days grew longer, but for Keisha, the weight she carried did not lessen. The community event had been a small victory, a glimmer of hope amid the storm. Yet the backlash was relentless. The threats over the phone hadn't stopped. Sometimes they came in messages, sometimes whispered warnings in the hallways. The fear was real, but Keisha refused to let it win. She found herself waking up in the middle of the night, heart pounding, replaying scenes from the schoolyard, the game, the hateful eyes. The loneliness wrapped around her like a cold blanket, suffocating. Her mother noticed. "You need rest," her mother said gently one evening. "And you need support." Keisha nodded, exhausted. But she didn't want to show weakness. Not now. At school, Jack had become a constant presence, not just as the popular athlete but as someone who truly stood with her. His own social circle had shrunk, friends distancing themselves, uncomfortable with his new stance. But Jack didn't care. One afternoon, as they sat together near the school's basketball court, Jack spoke quietly. "People don't want to change," he said. "Not really. They say they do, but when it gets real, they turn away." Keisha looked at him, her eyes heavy with tiredness. "Maybe they're scared. Or maybe they never cared," Jack said bitterly. Keisha clenched her fists. She felt the sting of truth in his words but refused to accept defeat. "Then we have to keep pushing," she said. "Even if it's just a few of us." Jack smiled faintly. "You're stronger than I thought." The school announced a new scholarship program aimed at promoting diversity and inclusion. Keisha was invited to help select candidates. It felt like a step forward, but also a reminder of how much work was left. She threw herself into the process, meeting students with stories both familiar and heartbreaking. Each face told a tale of struggle, resilience, and hope. One evening, after a long day of meetings, Keisha received a call from her best friend, Maya. "I'm worried about you," Maya said softly. "You're carrying too much." Keisha sighed. "I don't have a choice." "You do," Maya insisted. "You need to take care of yourself." The conversation stayed with Keisha long after they hung up. That weekend, Keisha decided to visit the city's community center, a place she had avoided for years because it reminded her of the hardest times. But today felt different. She walked through the doors and was greeted by warm smiles and familiar faces. She found herself surrounded by stories, struggles, and a shared determination to heal and grow. Among the crowd was Mrs. Thompson, a woman who had mentored Keisha when she was younger. "I'm proud of you," Mrs. Thompson said, embracing her. "You're doing what many wouldn't dare." Keisha felt tears prick her eyes. "Thank you." As the evening wore on, Keisha realized she wasn't alone. There was strength in community, in shared pain and shared hope. Back home, she sat by her window watching the city lights flicker. Her phone buzzed again. A message from Jack. "Tomorrow's a new day. Whatever happens, I'm here." Keisha smiled, a small flame of hope burning inside. But the road ahead was still uncertain. The morning light filtered softly through Keisha's bedroom window, but it did little to ease the heaviness in her chest. Today felt different. Not because the sun was shining or the air was warmer, but because she knew the moment she had been preparing for had arrived. Today, she would speak in front of the entire school, faculty, students, and community members. She had been asked to share her story as part of the school's new initiative on unity and respect. Her fingers trembled as she held the small sheet of paper with her notes. She'd practiced countless times, but the words still felt fragile, like glass waiting to shatter. Her mother knocked gently on the door and entered. "You're ready," her mother said with a quiet confidence. Keisha looked up, searching her mother's face for the strength she so desperately needed. "I hope so," she whispered. The auditorium was packed. The air was thick with anticipation and something else, tension, unspoken, but felt by everyone. When Keisha's name was called, her footsteps echoed down the aisle. She climbed the stage slowly, feeling every pair of eyes on her. The spotlight felt harsh, unforgiving. She stood at the microphone, took a deep breath, and looked out at the crowd. "I'm not here to ask for sympathy," she began, voice steady but soft. "I'm here because I believe in something better. I believe that our school, our community, can be a place where everyone belongs, no matter the color of their skin, no matter where they come from." A few students shifted uncomfortably, but many nodded, some wiping away tears. Keisha told them about the day in the courtyard, the humiliation, the pain, the fear. She spoke of the loneliness that followed, the nights she spent wondering if she was invisible or worse, a target. She didn't hide the anger either. I was angry, she said. At the people who turned away, at those who whispered and stared. But most of all, I was angry at myself. For letting their words hurt me so deeply. She paused, I scanning the room. But I learned something important. That anger can be fuel, not just to burn, but to build. Jack was there, sitting in the front row, watching with a mix of pride and remorse. Keisha's voice grew stronger. I stand here today not just as a victim, but as someone who refuses to be defined by hate. I want us all to look at each other, not as others, but as human beings. We have to challenge the stories we tell ourselves about people who are different. Because those stories can hurt. They can divide. Her words hung in the air, heavy and honest. After she finished, the room was silent. Then slowly, applause began, hesitant at first, then growing, louder, until it filled every corner of the auditorium. Keisha stepped down, heart pounding but lighter than it had been in months. Later that day, Jack approached her by the schoolyard. You were amazing, he said. Keisha smiled, feeling the weight of months lift just a little. Thanks. It wasn't easy. Jack looked serious. I want to help keep this going. Not just with words, but actions. Together, they started a student group focused on dialogue and understanding. It wasn't perfect. There were setbacks, arguments, and moments of doubt. But slowly, the school began to change. Teachers noticed. Parents noticed. Even those who had been silent before began to speak. One afternoon, Keisha received a message from a younger student she barely knew. Thank you for sharing your story. You made me feel less alone. Tears filled her eyes. Yet life didn't become simple. The scars remained, reminders of what she had endured and what many others still faced. But Keisha no longer felt powerless. She had found her voice. And she was determined to keep speaking. In the quiet moments, she thought back to that day in the courtyard. The pain, the fear, the humiliation. It still hurt, but now it was part of her story, not the whole story. She was more than that moment. More than the slurs, the threats, the loneliness. She was strength. Resilience. Hope. Her journey was far from over. But for the first time she could see the path ahead, not just for herself, but for everyone willing to walk it with her.